I imagine plenty of you have a deck on your to-do list, and in this video I'm actually traveling to Nashville to help a good friend of mine rebuild his porch and deck. If you've been watching my channel, you'll probably recognize the name Greg Pennington. He is the master chairmaker that I've taken a few classes with, and the last time I was there, he mentioned wanting to demo his existing porch, which is only 10 feet deep, and rebuild it to be 16 feet deep. It is a huge job and right up my alley, so I offered to come back for a week and help him out. Since Greg has an existing structure, the first thing we needed to do was demo. The goal was to remove everything and start fresh. I helped up on the roof with a circular saw and a Diablo Demo Demon blade. I made a very long cut, about a foot from the header, that connects the porch to the shop.
Blade cutting okay?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's so easy. It's cutting through it like butter. If you have any sort of demo work, I highly recommend picking up one of these blades as it's designed to cut through anything. Here I'm chopping through asphalt shingles, nails, plywood, and joist all at the same time. Now, the plan was to chop up the porch in small enough sections that we could use the tractor to carry them away. So next I used the circular saw to go from the back cut line to the front of the porch. With my blade all the way down, I was able to cut through most of the material, but not 100% of the 2x6 rafters or that front header of the porch. So I came back with the Sawzall blade next. Now using a Diablo Demo Demon Sawzall blade, which are specifically designed to cut through both metal and wood. When I got close, Greg would set the forks of his tractor under the section so that when I cut through the last bit, he was there to catch it and then carry it off. We learned from the first one that using the forks was a little difficult because they would want to punch through the roof too easily, since wood was a little bit soft from water damage. So while I was chopping up the next section, Greg made a jig to span the forks and to create a more even footprint when picking up the next section. Then we repeat it, just breaking up the porch into sections that the tractor could carry away. With the bulk of the porch gone, now we could hop up on scaffolding to remove the tail ends left behind that I was using as a safe walking platform while chopping up the rest of the roof. Since we're going right back up with the porch, we wanted to remove everything except for the header because we'll reuse that for the rafters of our new porch. Okay, that was easy enough, so let's see if we can demo the deck before dark. We tackled this in the same fashion. I first made a long cut along the house and then multiple cuts going out to the end of the deck so that it could be broken up in sections and carried off. After getting the big bulk removed, all we had left was to remove the small tails of each joist, just like what we did on the porch. Again, we left the header in place since we're going to reuse it. Last board at demo. There. That's out of the way, so now it was on to rebuilding. The first thing to do is to set beams that the joist will be connected to. These are going to be connected to the header we left in place on the last step with joist hangers. And here's a method for easily figuring out how to determine the height of your joist hangers. Greg has a piece of the rafter material or the floor joist material as well as the thickness of the deck board so that you can temporarily do like a dry fit, hold up your floor joist, hold up your deck boards, and now this will determine the height that you need to set your joist hangers at. It is important to get the height correctly here so that you have a smooth transition into the building once the deck is complete. I recommend screwing in the first side, then using a piece of 2x cut-off scrap to get the width correctly, and then screwing down the second side. Now we can set the back end of the beam in place and figure out how much buildup on the front end we'll need in order for the beam to be level. To do this, set the back end in the joist hanger on the header, and then place a level on the front. While one person reads where level is, another can be reading a tape to see what the height needs to be. Once this is determined, you can use an assortment of material to create this buildup. On the taller ones, we use the standard off-the-shelf cement blocks. But on the shorter ones, we would lay down some gravel and use a small brick paver. You'll also notice that we doubled up on the beam material. I recommend looking into span charts for the distance you're trying to cover, and that will tell you what dimension of material is rated for the span. This can certainly be tedious work, but if you take your time and make sure that your beams are square to the building, square to each other, and also level, then all the other steps are going to be so much smoother for you. Next up is attaching the joists, which run perpendicular to the beams and connect from the inside to inside with more joist hangers. The first step in this stage is to lay out where the joists need to go. We would first pull a tape along the beam and make our marks so that we could come back and attach the joist hangers at their needed locations. I recommend the same process as before to attach these. First drive in a screw on one side, then use a scrap piece of 2x material to open the hanger to the needed width before driving in the second screw. You don't want it to be so tight on the scrap that you have to struggle to get the joist in, but you do want it to be relatively close. You can also use a cutoff of whatever material you're using for the joist to determine the height of these hangers. You want the top of the joist to be perfectly flush to the top of the beams here. After getting done with one bay, we repeat it on the others. And yes, it is a lot of joist hangers. Now, if we did everything correctly, we should be able to set up a miter saw and start cutting all of the joists to the same length and then slip them in one by one into the hangers. This is where taking your time to square up the beam really pays off. If you're out of square, then your numbers will be all over the place, and you'll have to measure each one individually. I recommend setting up a stop block on your miter and having one person cut and then another person attach. I threw in a Diablo 60-tooth fine finish blade, which has their Tyco high-density carbide teeth, which increases performance and leaves an incredibly clean cut. Then in my circular saw, I switched from the Demo Demon to the 24th tooth framing blade, which has Diablo's tracking point tooth design. This not only provides straight cuts, but also 5 times longer life and an enhanced anti-vibration technology, making it my go-to circular saw blade when framing. The hangers do have hole locations for nails, but since we're using a nail gun, it's far easier to toenail in the board. So while I set the joist in their pockets, Greg would be attaching each one. Our next step could have actually been skipped, but it doesn't take that much time and it actually makes a really big difference. So the difference real quick in the blocking, that has the blocking put in on it and this doesn't, and that's just going to reduce some of the bounce. You can already tell this one how much bounce this has in it versus that one. Before moving on to decking, we went back through each bay and added in blocking, which is just a board that spans in between joist to joist. These are face nailed into the joists themselves, roughly at center of the bay. And you can see that I'm staggering them so that each one can be face nailed in instead of having to be toe-nailed in on one side. Alrighty, blocking is done, which actually completes the substructure of the entire deck. So let's move on to the decking stage. Oh, actually, before moving on to decking, we moved to the front of the deck and attached the drop girders. These boards will cover up the front end of the deck, giving it a nice clean look. It also stiffens up the front of the deck by tying together each one of the beams. These are attached super simply by holding the top end flush to the top of the beams and then screwing them on. Cut the board so that the ends fall on the center of each one of these beams. Okay, and now on to decking. On Greg's original porch, he had the boards running parallel to the shop. However, he is a chair maker, and so whenever he would move a rocking chair out onto this porch, it would create just a jerky rocking motion. So since we were going through the rebuild, he decided to run the boards parallel to the shop so that it would create a much easier rock with his chairs. With that, we started on one side and just worked our way over to the other. We are using some treated 2x6 material, and these are screwed down into each one of the joists. Now, screwing the boards down takes up a lot of time. However, by going with screws, the deck boards will not pop out over time, so I do think it's worth it. The system that we worked out is to stage a good amount of boards in front of our workable area, so that Greg and I could just pull from the pile and start screwing it down. The end that matters here is the end closest to the porch. It's important that the end is butted up tightly to the shop. The other end, however, can just fall wherever it falls off the deck. This is called letting it run wild, because after the deck boards are placed and attached, we'll pop a chalk line and cut all of the ends to be perfectly straight line. It's also worth mentioning that to quickly get through this step, we only put in 2 screws on our respected ends. So we would throw down a board, Greg would put in a screw on his end, I would put in 2 on mine, and then one of us would throw one in the middle somewhere. Then we would throw down the next board and repeat. We did it this way so that we could eat through this step quickly while we still had daylight. Then over the next few days, anytime one of us had, even 15 minutes to kill, we would go back and put in some filler screws on the remaining joist lines. It's just a way to keep the project moving along. After all of the deck boards were laid down, we could determine what overhang Greg wanted on the front end, pop a chalk line, and then use the circular saw to straighten up that wild end. It was certainly a cram-packed 2 days, but it was so rewarding to see how much work we could get done in that amount of time. It was also rewarding to move some rocking chairs out on it.
I couldn't do this before. Can you go on boards?
If a deck has been on your to-do list, then I really hope that this video has helped you out, making you feel empowered that you can tackle it yourself. It is kind of a larger project, so I recommend breaking it up into stages and just tackling it one bit at a time. Now stay tuned for my next video where Greg and I are going to be building the porch onto his deck. I'll see you next time.
What a great day.